Hello and welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. My name is Joris and today I'm going to talk about investing in Europe with European ETFs. And in this part 1 of the series, so this series is going to consist of 5 parts. And the first one, it goes mainly about the ETFs that invest in the MSCI Europe Index. So in total, for European ETFs that invest in Europe, I found 21 ETFs that invest their money in European companies and that are based in Europe and distribute a dividend. And important to say about this is that I won't include synthetic replicated ETFs, so swap-based ETFs, they are not in this list. And yeah, if you know of any other European-based ETFs besides the 21 that I'm going to name in the next 5 videos, so this one and the next 4, I should say, then please put them in the comments down below. Like that, I can learn from you, just as you can learn something from me as well when you are watching my videos. And it would be helpful for me when you could do that, so thank you in advance. And today we are going to talk about the MSCI Europe ETFs, and it's the most used index to track European companies. And I'm also going to cover 2 other ETFs, which I couldn't find another place for to discuss them. And I think they are appropriate here as well, so the performance and stuff are more or less the same as the MSCI Europe, so I think they belong in this video. And then in the other videos you will see that there are a lot of indexes that are being used by ETFs, and in that regard I'm always going to look at the total expense ratio, the performance of the ETFs and the dividend yield, and I'm going to list them up at the end of the video in a table, so you can have a nice overview. You can pause the video then, if you like. And an important side note is that all the data that I'm presenting are as at the end of the trading day of the 26th of January of 2024. So that was last Friday. I'm going to record all the videos in one go, but I'm going to spread them out over 2 weeks. So at the end of the 2 weeks, it's already a 2 weeks discrepancy. But with this video, it's only one trading day. So it's just so we can compare the same things against each other. So when I'm 2 weeks further down the road, I'm still talking about the situation at the end of the 26th. So the first one, that's the HMEU. It's a fund from HSBC. It's situated in Ireland, and as I said, it's tracking the MSCI Europe, and the total expense ratio is only 0.10%, so pretty cheap. It notes on the 6 in euros, and the current price is 16.26. And an important thing about this fund is that you can also invest in it in US dollar, and then it pays out in euros. You don't have a lot of ETFs that you can invest US dollars into and receive euros. There are a few that go from US dollar to Swiss francs when you invest in bonds, but I'm not a big fan of investing in bonds through ETFs. And from stocks, ETFs, it's not possible to go from US dollar to Swiss francs. So the next best thing is then US dollars to euros. So when you are interested, this is a great fund to do that. So there are 428 companies in this ETF that are being tracked. yeah, because it's the MSCI Europe normally, and in the MSCI Europe there are 431 companies represented right now. So this one is following 428 of them. And it's a fully replicated ETF. The performance, so it's 10.19% in the last year. The last 3 years it performed also really good, 31.21%, and the last 5 years it has a record of 55.25%. So pretty nice performance. I'm not going to talk about the performance since its inception date. As you know, it has to mainly to do with the fact whether or not it started shortly after a crisis or before a crisis, whether or not it's a good number that you see here. But I'm always going to mention it because some people really like to see it. But then, of course, the most important thing in this channel, that's the dividends. And this fund, it pays out twice in a year, and that's in February and in August, and it has a dividend yield of 2.77%. And yeah, it's being paid out at the beginning of those months, so pretty nice dividend yield and a good performance. So total return is certainly pretty good. Then we go to an ETF from iShares, the YMEU. It's also based in Ireland. It has a total expense ratio of 0.12%. And on the 6th, it's noted in Swiss francs. And that's important for the performance. I'm going to that later. And the dividends are always being paid out in euros, so that's important that you know that. I'm not going to repeat that for the remainder of the video and in the next videos as well. So it's 427 companies that are in this ETF. There are 6.6 billion invested in this ETF, so it's actually the largest one that is investing in the European companies, and it's a sampling one. And here you can see between parentheses what the performance is when it should have been in euro, the ETF. So in this case it's Swiss francs, so this is the performance that you can find on the Swiss stock exchange. But if you go to just ETF and convert everything to euro, you see that the performance is a lot better and more in line with the other funds that follow the MSCI Europe index. So I think it's unfair if I just watch at the performance in Swiss francs and then compare them with the other ones that are noted in euro. So I'm going to list them according to the performance, all in euro. Then the dividends. So it pays 4 times in a year, so quarterly. It has a dividend yield of 2.84%, and the distributions are actually rather nice distributed. So you don't have a much higher number here in May or June, like with a lot of other ETFs. I'm not going to point that out with all the other ETFs. You can look at it as I go through it, but you will see most of the time in the second quarter of quarterly paying dividend ETFs that there is a much higher number there that is distributed compared to the other 3 distributions that happen. Then the next one, it's from UBS with a total expense ratio of 0.10 for the MSCI Europe that is based in Luxembourg. And it's noted on euro on the 6th. There are 431 stocks represented in the ETF, 198 million invested in it, and a full replicated one. Also, the yield plus minus the same as all the other MSCI Europe ETFs. So 10, 30, 40, 55, 55, 54. And then the dividends, of course, it's an UBS one, just like the HBSC fund, only 2 distributions in a year. The dividend yield, not that bad at all, 2.70%. And these are the distributions that were distributed recently, the last year. And then we can go to the one from Amundi, also based in Luxembourg, with a total expense ratio of 0.15, and it's called 10A, and that's because it's in purple because it's only available on German stock markets, and there on the Cetra it's noted in euro, and there are 434 companies in this ETF, which is actually strange because the MSCI Europe only has 431, but sometimes that happens, of course. 308 million invested in it, a full replicated one, and once again, 9.5, 30, and around 55% performance for 5 years, 3 years, and 1 year in the past periods. And the dividends, once again, a dividend yield more or less around 2.70%. And a strange thing happened with this fund. So it pays only once in a year and at the end of the year. But the previous years it was always in November. And this, so in 2023, it was suddenly in December. And what happened on Just ETF? You could see that suddenly, because in the last year, since the last dividend date in November was passed, they said there wasn't a dividend being paid out for that ETF in the last year. So it said dividend yield for the last year 0%, and I think a lot of people panicked then and said, "Man, what is happening?" But just remember, you can always go to the site of Amundi, look up your fund and look at the distributions, and then you can find when the next distribution is going to take place. And there you could see, I think it was 2.5, 3 months earlier that it was going to happen in December. So there wasn't a danger for not being paid out a dividend in 2023, but I think a lot of people got frightened. So it can happen. You have to be aware of that. The EL42, again, violet or purple. So this again only available on the German stock exchanges, Deka, MSCI Europe UCITS ETF. It's also German-based ETF. The total expense ratio is pretty expensive, 0.30% for an MSCI Europe fund. That's actually quite up there. And a strange thing happens then, that actually there is a lot of money invested in this fund. So although it's one of the more expensive ones, yeah, still a lot of people choose this ETF. The performance, it's okay. It's a little bit less than all the other MSCI Europe funds. So you have to take into account. Probably it's because of the total expense ratio that weighs every year slightly on the performance over the continuing years. And the dividends also a little bit lower because they take a little bit more from the dividends that they get paid, of course, and they don't pay out then as much cash as the other ETFs. And here you can see the distributions. And I couldn't find the actual dates, so, and also the distributions on the site of Deka. I think it's a terrible site for a fund this big and a firm that big. I think they should ameliorate their site for sure. So if you are a person from the firm Deka, please do something about your site. It's really user unfriendly, and for finding distributions it's a hell. So also downloading the performance of or the prices over a whole year, it takes ages before you can download the Excel list, so that's really awful. Then I think this is the, yeah, after this one there is another fund left, but I thought this one was important to mention with all the other MSCI Europe ETFs, because Vanguard, they follow the FTSE Developed Europe Index. Total expense ratio is 0.10, just like 4 of the 5 MSCI Europe ETFs that we just saw. And also, okay, it's in Swiss francs, so you have the same with the performance that I'm going to show in a few seconds. But 2.4 billion invested in it and 550 companies, so it's 120, around 120 more than in the MSCI Europe Index. And when you look at the performance, it's 10, around 30 and 55%. So it's more or less the same as the MSCI index. So I thought it deserved to be mentioned in this video. And also the dividend yield is around 2.90%. So a little bit higher than 2.70 up to 2.84% or 86% for the iShares one. And also nice distributions from Vanguard here. And as I said, total expense ratio 0.10, really nice. And the final one for today, that's the UBS one, but it's a small cap. I'm going to repeat this one in the video that is coming about the ETFs that invest in small caps for Europe. But I'm already giving it here because it's also MSCI based fund. Okay, it's a different index, but there is also MSCI in the fund name, so that you don't confuse the other one from UBS with this one. It's also Luxembourg based. The total expense ratio is 0.33, so actually the most expensive one of the video of today. And there are 429 holdings in it, 94 million invested in it, so not that many. And the performance, when you look at it, it's a little bit less than the MSCI Europe, the normal index. So the small caps, they underperformed, especially in the last year. They underperformed the first 3 years, in fact, as well. So it needs to be around 30%. So they performed only half as good as the MSCI Europe Index. Here it's only 7-8% less. So that's still okay, but the last 3 years, small caps are really underperforming. And it was the same in the series that I made about Swiss ETFs. So ETFs that invest in Swiss companies. There, the ETFs that invest in the small caps as well and the mid caps, they underperformed the large cap hugely in the last 3 years. So hopefully they can regain traction, but small caps, I'm not really a fan of ETFs that invest in small caps. But that besides, okay, UBS, 2 dividends in a year, almost always, so February, August, 2.64% dividend yield, and these are the distributions. So when we look then at an overview in a table of the 7 funds that we looked at today, then you see that the HMEU and the EMU are in fact really really good performing funds, but the other MSCI Europe funds are also really good, except the EL42. Those are a bit lower, and I think that has mainly to do with the high total expense ratio. And you can see here a dividend trap. It would be announced in red, but as you can see, there is no red indicated, so I don't think there are dividend traps here. all reasonable dividend yields, all reasonable good performances. And you can see here, it's always important that you take into account in which currency a fund is trading. So when you would only look at the performance on just ETF and you see 29% here and 29% there for IMEU and VEUR, you would think it underperforms the other three ETFs, the other four ETFs, but in fact they are more or less the same, all of them. So the one of Vanguard that is in the FTSE Developed Europe Index, more or less all perform the same. So then for me it comes down to the total expense ratio, and in that regard you have good choices, and I think yeah, the EL42, I wouldn't pick that. So, but on the other hand, you see here, not financial advice, so I'm just pointing out the obvious. I'm looking at the numbers, I'm telling you the numbers, and that's what I think. Also, the one that invests in small caps, 0.33, I think you can then better invest in the normal MSCI fund. So, with that being said, thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel, and hitting that like button helps the channel out as well. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video on my YouTube channel. Bye!